Welcome to Be in the Garden. Welcome to Be in Nature. I trust you're well. I certainly am. We are fast tracking to winter here in the UK. We are in November here in the UK, and the weather, though cold, it's not as cold as it has been in past winters, but it's actually been quite dry recently, which is a bit of a bonus. The ground is not yet frozen. I'm sure it will be so in a few weeks' time. But I'm out in the garden today to get in some fresh air, that's number one, but also just to do a few bits and bobs. So today in my garden, I'm doing bits and bobs in the garden. That's what today is all about. And why? Because I find at this time of year, that very end of autumn, sort of encroaching into winter, there are sort of lots of things to do, but nothing quite specific. I'm going to prune back some of my apple trees, I think, and I've washed my shears, my garden secateurs, but I'm also going to use some cheap alcohol. I don't drink. I'm going to use some of this cheap alcohol just to make sure I disinfect my secateurs. That's always a good idea before you start pruning back things like fruit trees and such. So here goes. And it is really just to make sure I'm not passing on any unnecessary diseases from one plant potentially to another. So I will sort of disinfect my secateurs from one tree to the next, if you don't see me doing that in between. I may also today plant out some tulips. These ones here, they look amazing. Look at the colours. I'd never heard of those before, and now is a great time actually. Late autumn is a great time for planting out what will be spring flowering bulbs. So long as the ground is not frozen, really any time from August, September, October, November time, you can get planting bulbs. I'm going to plant these out and I'll be sure to bring you back to see what these look like next year. So here goes. Let's walk around the garden and see what needs doing. Here are one of the apple trees you saw me harvesting in one of my previous videos. You can see that the apples, I think I've got one apple actually still dangling on one of my trees. But typically pruning can happen really at any time of the year. I like doing it late autumn time or early spring. And number one, it's just to manage the shape of the tree. So that's one of the reasons why you might want to prune back a tree. You can see in the background, you see that the beautiful colour of the Virginia creeper or Boston ivory. This one is the tricuspidata because it's got the 3 lobes. The other one is quinquefoliae, which has the 5 lobes. I can never quite remember which one is which, but it's still the tricuspidata as opposed to the quinquefolio. So here's the apple tree, getting back to the apple tree. I had a little bit of damage on this tree. Can you see that? If I move this branch, if we go back towards the tree, I had something fall on that, unfortunately. It has snapped one of the main branches. This could be a passage for disease to enter into the main tree, and so it's always a good idea when pruning to take out the 3 Ds. The 3 Ds are dead, damaged, or diseased. And this one is clearly damaged, and it's a shame, but I do need to prune that branch out. I will be using secateurs, and I will also be using my pruning knife or my pruning saw to take that particular one out. So we are looking to prune back just to sort of reshape this tree and some of my other trees around the garden, and really focusing on the dead, damaged and diseased branches. I'm actually going to start off by cutting out the damaged branch here. Otherwise, the damage can allow disease to enter into the tree. This particular branch will need to be cut off, or I intend to cut it off all the way back to this point here. And some tips in cutting back could be really to cut it away where the weight of the branch is. So rather than going straight in and cutting it immediately at the joint, which is where the final cut will be, I will cut it beforehand earlier on, and that is just so that the weight is taken off. So I'm going to cut it here first of all and then move back to the final junction, if you like. Okay, you can do it in various stages if you like. So just, these are really nice sharp pruners, and if you do it that way, it simply takes the weight off where the joint is. Holding the camera with one hand, sawing with the other. Okay, can you see that now? People do often ask when cutting where to prune back to, and it's really, I mean, it's up to each individual, but a good idea is to prune back to something. Here I have pruned all the way back to the beginning of where a branch is. It's a good idea to prune back to a branch or a leaf or a spur. So prune back to something. Sorry for the wobbly effect here. It's just I'm walking around with the camera, balancing and cutting at the same time. So I created there a clean cut all the way back. It will heal over itself, as you can see previous cuts that have been made on the tree. It will just heal back. Okay, so I'm going to carry on pruning back on this particular tree. Sorry about the noise, we're all out in our gardens. One of my neighbours is clearly doing some, some garden work or DIY. You can hear the hammering, so apologies for that, but life goes on. What I'm aiming for is to remove, apart from the dead, damaged and diseased, I'm going to try and remove any of the branches that are growing in towards the tree as well. That's to help increase airflow so the leaves are not growing all inside. Increasing airflow reduces the risk of, someone's very happy with their hammer out there. Increasing the airflow reduces the risk of certain diseases as well, and just gives lots of aeration to the fruits as they grow. Here is another example of some damage to this particular branch. Can you see that just here? And so I'm going to remove this branch out. Where will I cut it to? I need to cut it back to something. I can either cut it to these smaller spurs here, or I could cut it all the way back to here and let this become the leading branch. However, this leading branch is inside of the tree, so I'm going to snip that one out, and I'm holding the camera and pruning at the same time, and then I'm going to cut this one here. Okay, so I'm going to carry on pruning this tree and then I will bring you along to the next job that I do in my bits and bobs journey today. Another tip with pruning back, especially fruit trees, as I mentioned, is to try and remove any of the branches that are growing in towards the tree. You can see just about here, I have this branch and it's curled in on itself and it's coming back in towards this area that I'm trying to keep aerated. So I'm going to be removing this particular branch away from the tree. Another thing with pruning as well is to try and prune back to a leaf or a bud, a spur that is outwards facing. In other words, for example here, although I'm not pruning back this particular branch, if I were to, I would prune this back so that whichever twig branch is remaining, it is facing outwards and not facing inwards. In other words, I'm trying to balance everything. In other words, I would avoid pruning back to this one as it is facing somewhat back into the tree. I would prune so that whichever part of the branch is last facing, the last part of the branch is facing outwards into where there is growth and not back into the tree. I'm going to now aim to remove that particular branch because it's going in towards the tree. There's another one here that's coming in towards the tree. I'm not sure if you can see it from there. We're going to remove that one on the side. The principle is the same with the blueberries. Here, they fruited very well this year, and I'm just simply going to do the same as I did with pruning the trees, the apple tree rather, and that is to remove any dead, damaged or diseased branches. If you look a little closer, you can see this long one here. It's hard to tell whether it is dry or dead, so what I'm going to do is just using my secateur, scrape it, and there's no fresh green there, so this I now know is a dead branch. There's quite a bit going on there, but you can see here this, well, I just snapped it and it just came off anyway, but you can see some of them definitely do look dry. I will remove those and I'll just keep going back until I find the part of the blueberry where there's some fresh growth. That one snapped off, so that was, dead, damaged, diseased, dry as well. They can be removed. The brittle parts here, the top part is dry, but just beneath there's actually fresh growth. I just scrape that, so just above that I'm going to cut everything above. Again, dry, it fell off. This branch here appears with the eye as if it's dry and brittle, but actually again, if you just use the secateurs just scrape back, you can see the fresh green there. It doesn't damage the plant itself, and all the growth above it is actually new. But I'm just going to sort of get rid of any of the dry parts. means a plant can put more energy into the green ones. In this bed area, I have quite a few unwanted plants, aka weeds, wildflowers, and I'm just going to do a little bit of digging those out in this area here. I am by no means pulling everything out. I want the ground to have cover. In fact, everything that breaks down and dies back will nourish the soil. So for me, it's actually very important to avoid letting the soil be naked or bare over the winter. Quite the opposite. The soil, I maintain the leaves that fall. I allow them to fall into the flower bed areas and to cover the area so that over the winter they break down and nourish the soil. Also, actually, by covering the soil area, they act as a mulch and therefore suppress any unwanted, aka wild flowers. So I'm just going to continue. The soil is soft, it's moist, and it's still not frozen, so I'm able just to remove some of them here. There are other wildflowers that I have here that I'm actually encouraging to grow, but it's very important for me through the winter to just do as much as is necessary, but certainly not too much. Here I had the peonies, and you can see, let's see if I can get you to see that, where the base of the peony was here, and the peony itself has more or less died back. That's what's remaining, but I will prune these back down and then they will regrow because these are perennials. They'll grow back again next year. I could leave the leaves here in situ, but because I'm out in the garden doing bits and bobs, I plan to just cut those back down, almost down to ground level. This was a metal hoop I put around them just to help keep their heads up over the winter, in the summer when they're in full bloom. But this is nice because when they die all the way back, sometimes it's very difficult for me to see where the plants once were, but these are a reminder of where the peonies were. So I'll simply prune these back. Most of what I cut back I will use in my compost or as mulching in different areas around the garden. You can see here there's a lot of anemone. That's this growth here, and in fact it's more than I need around the garden. So at some point, perhaps this side of winter, maybe in the spring, I'll be removing some of those, planting them up into little containers such as this one here, and then I normally gift them to friends. But an anemone, I think you plant it once and it does come back over and over and over again. So it's not too much of a tidy up, it's just some of the things, some of the dry sticks and plants, just removing those. I'll be putting these into the compost. I am removing some of the wildflowers in certain areas. These pull up quite easily from the soil at the moment. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with leaving these spent flowers. There's absolutely nothing wrong. In fact, they give some structure to the garden. Absolutely nothing wrong in leaving them. It just depends how I feel. And today I feel like pruning them back. These were the ericaceae. I'm sorry, these were the echinacea. Do you remember I harvested the seeds from some of them? Some of them are still visible on the plants, and I'll leave those maybe for birds or to self-seed. Over here I've got the terracotta bowl that I think I showed you in the previous video. I transferred from one space of the garden to another. I've actually planted this one near the banana plants, which incidentally are still putting on growth. Isn't that something? We're in November in the UK here, and this banana plant is still trying to do something. However, in this terracotta planter, I've got some unwanted plants, and I'm just going to pull those out. The heucheras just need a slight tidy up. Literally just pulling out the dry flower stalks. And just tidy up some of the pebble areas at the lower base of the pots. I put these pebbles in here many years ago, and they were really very fresh. They look so aged now. I love it. I love that they have moss growing on them in areas. And yes, I like the natural feel of these. The natural look here, where nature has just got involved. But I'm trying to create a bit of a balance where they're not overtaken entirely by wildflowers. So always finding a bit of a balance. I love this area, how it looks. Just removing some, but not all, of the voluntary plants in here, because as you can see, it looks actually beautiful. Look at that fern there growing in the middle of these little rocks. Lovely. I love that. That's just the balance I'm looking for. Okay, so now to another job, an odd job around the garden. This part of the garden underneath one of my cherry trees is actually rich with helleborus or hellebore. I'm going to prune back, or I'm going to remove some of these large hellebore leaves from last year or early this year to allow and encourage the new growth which is inside, so that they can show off their beautiful flowers. So this area does have quite a lot of hellebore. I'm going to remove some of these surplus, shall we put it, surplus comfrey, to expose a bit more of the hellebore so that I can enjoy the beauty of the hellebore this winter. So I'm quite literally going to take off all these bigger, older leaves, and then that will allow for the flowers to be exposed and do their thing. I'm going to see if I can dig out that large comfrey at the back there, or at least take down some of the leaves to give the hellebore as much opportunity to grow. I thought I had more hellebore back here. I might still be a little bit early to see the shoots of them, but I will keep an eye out. Okay, there's another little plant there, and there's another one at the front there. Yep, so there is more. Okay, got a bit of raking up to do as well. You can see there's another hellebore. That's the shoot from which the flowers will emerge, and it's lovely seeing those fabulous flowers when there's not much else growing in the garden. I'll just have a little tidy up of this area whilst I'm here. The flower bed is grown well into the lawn, so I'm just going to tidy up this section a little. The lawn has grown a lot since I mowed it back, so weather has been quite mild. I feel to cut it back again, but perhaps I'll leave it. The soil is very soft, so it's quite easy to do the removal of plants at this time of year, aka weeding. Okay, so thank you so much for joining me. I told you this was a bits and bobs session. Thank you so much for being with me. I do appreciate you. You know I do. And if I haven't said I do, I do. Thank you so much. I trust you're well. Keep keeping well. And I'll see you in my next video. Please do, even now, thumbs up will go such a long way in, as they call it, that posh word, the algorithms on the channel. But I really do appreciate you. Please do, if you can, thumbs up. A comment would be so graciously received. Just a simple word: enjoy, bless, kind, be. A simple word. I'd really appreciate that. But in the meantime, keep well and keep warm. And I'll see you in my next video. Just got to do some raking up now. See you soon. Bye.